All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the VRARA Detroit chapter event. Today, we are talking about UX, UI, and design. I am your host, Brad Waid, and I am so excited to be with you today, joined by a lot of amazing, incredible people. You can see them on the screen now. I'll give them just a second to introduce themselves, but thank you again for joining us. All right, so here we go. For the next hour, we're going to be talking about UX, UI, and design, and augmented and virtual reality. I'm going to go ahead and start, and I'm going to introduce Joe. Joe, I'd like you to introduce yourself, how you came a part of this, and then I'd like you to hand it off to John, and then we're going to see who else is joining us today.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for having us. It's quite an honor to be part of the first VRARA Detroit event. So we're really excited about that. My name's Joe Van Harken. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer of Third Coast Digital Solutions. We are a production company with a history in video and training, corporate training background. And the past 5 years, we've really been digging into XR technology. One of the big bottlenecks that we see coming up in the next few years, now that XR technology is scaling technically, is the user interface. How are we interacting with information in the 3D spatial computing landscape? So last year, about this time, we were fortunate enough to get a grant from the U of M, University of Michigan's Economic Growth Institute in order to partner with Kendall College of Art and Design of Fair State University to kick off a first ever XR innovation lab focused specifically on design. So with that, that's who's joining me today is one of the PIs, John Kozatek, and as well as the other student panelists. I'll let them introduce themselves and stop talking now.
All right, John, that's to you now.
Yeah, right. Hey, I'm John Kozatek. I'm an alum and adjunct instructor of graphic design at Kendall College of Art and Design, also known as KCAD. And then, as Joe pointed out, I'm also co-principal investigator of the KCAD XR lab. On the side, I also have a studio called Co's Creative, which is a marketing, communications, advertising, and branding identity design studio. I've had that studio since 1991. I'm going to pass this on to our students to allow them to introduce themselves. I will not be actively participating in this panel discussion. Basically, I feel this is a great platform for the students to talk about their discoveries and their participation in our program. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Anna Devine.
Hi guys, my name is Anna. I am a senior at Kendall College of Art and Design. I'll actually be graduating here in like a little over 2 weeks, which is very exciting. Yeah, let's see. I haven't really, the last year or two is when I really got into UI UX design. The thing that I really enjoy about it is the research focus. I love researching and writing. So I've really enjoyed digging into that this last year, relating it specifically to virtual and augmented reality. It's been really, really fun. But Zach?
Yeah, I'm Zach Bennett. Yeah, I'm also a senior right there with Anna, and we'll be done just, it feels like, right around the corner. But my background is in print design, and I came back to school to kind of hone my skills and ended up in the XR lab to kind of like focus on new tech and kind of, explore UI, UX, typography, kind of some of the more nitty gritty fine details of UX design.
Awesome. Thank you, Zach. And Carter.
Hi, I'm Carter Taranis. I'm also a senior graphic design student at Kendall College of Art and Design. I'm the latest addition to the intern team. I'm super interested in basically like how cultures or the relationships between graphic design and culture. So this has been a really interesting kind of road to go down in terms of UI and AR. So,
well, awesome. Well, thank you for everybody introducing yourselves. And here we're going to go ahead and get started. And Joe, I'm going to start with you. We're going to talk just kind of the basics UX UI. And Joe, you know, we have spent a lot of time chatting. We've gone down the rabbit hole. We have a lot of the same passions, for, you know, evangelizing the technology. That's why we are here today. You know, and it's interesting because, you know, in our talks when we were setting this up, you know, when I'm out evangelizing and speaking, you know, my professional job as a keynote speaker and a show host, you know, TV show host and stuff. And one of the things that I'd always talk about is I talk a lot in educational technology conferences, a lot in industrial conferences. And one of the things I talk about are 5 awesome jobs. And one of them is UX UI designer. And so I'd really like, you know, why don't you take just a quick moment, Joe, to kind of talk a little bit about, for people who are watching it, you know, they've known the acronym, they know it, they've heard it, but maybe between you and me, why don't you start, just kind of share a little bit what UX, UI is and the differences, and let's get people brought up to speed so they know where we're going when we go deeper in this conversation.
To be honest, I know that Coz mentioned he didn't really want to speak too much, but I may default to some of his insight into this area. Specifically myself, I'm not a UX UI guy. As you can see, the students laughing. I've tried to show my skills throughout the year, and they're pretty pathetic, which is part of the reason that prompted me to kickstart this initiative. With the team. So for the exact professional definitions, I'll defer to Coz over there.
All right, Coz, if you could just give us, you know, just a general definition. I'll chime in with you as well. But as far as you're concerned and the way you lay it out, what's the difference between UX and UI?
One letter.
Yeah, it's so true. All right, touche. Well done.
Right. So UX, the X in UX is experience, right? It's the interaction and the experience that users have with a company's products or service. I like to think of UX as being the bones or the background behind the scenes, so to speak. And UI, I is for the interaction or the interface. It's a specific asset users interact with. So the primary difference with me is UX is the bones or the background, whereas UI is the skin. It's the overall look and feel of the device or the experience.
Well, that's awesome, and I appreciate that. You know, the thing is for people out there that are watching, UX, UI, think about, we as humans, we always interact with machines. It's everything from our phone to a tablet to our computers to a machine to a piece of equipment. That's an interface. It's also called HMI, human machine interface. Part of that bigger process is UX, UI, user experience, user interface. One way to think about is thinking about UX is really about the user, how we interact. UI is really more about the company or the product. So think about it like this. When we go in to use our phone, okay, so you know, to open my phone right now, I can either use my facial recognition or type in a code. Okay, that you know, experience going in, that interface is pretty easy, pretty simple. Apple and phone companies need me to get inside. Well, what if the interface was like so cumbersome? It took a code, but then it took checking out, you know, like, you know, the ones where it says like click all the pictures that aren't a traffic light, or all the ones that don't have a shadow. And you're like, really, are you kidding me? Like, that is, you know, that is part of the interface, okay, the UI. If the UI is terrible, it doesn't matter how good the experience is. If it's hard to get in, or if it's just the opposite, like it's easy to get inside, but it's hard to use, you have to have the UX and the UI both working together and simplified. So basically what this is really like, what are the needs of the product to get somebody in, and then how easy is it to use? Because, you know, the company needs me to do X, Y, and Z on this machine. But if it's so hard, makes no sense, I'm not going to do it. So there we go. So that's the UX and the UI. Now, I'd really like to, I want to take a moment here. I'd really like to start asking the students some questions. And Anna, I'd really like to start with you if we could. I know you're doing research on accessibility for people with disabilities in XR for using the technology. Can you elaborate a little bit more about your thoughts and where you're going with that?
With the accessibility study specifically?
Yes.
Yeah, so basically my interest was piqued about this topic earlier on in this year when I wrote kind of a brief article for Joe's Third Eye XR blog place where people write articles. I wrote a short article kind of just doing a brief overview on what accessibility for people with disabilities looks like right now in XR. So this last semester, I have spent the whole semester pretty much doing deeper research into that from a lens of like cultural studies. So pretty much I've found a lot of really interesting things. Going back to the beginning of XR technology, a lot of this stuff started with entertainment as the purpose of it. So super cool, lots of really, really awesome stuff happening, in the development. But unfortunately, because entertainment was the first thought, the foundation of the technology was not built with accessibility necessarily in mind, which has led to a lot of problems now as a lot of these virtual and augmented reality solutions are getting more widespread into businesses, for training and webinars and, and lots of different businesses are using them. But if the technology is not accessible as this becomes more widespread, it's very problematic. So a lot of companies are having to backpedal to figure out where those discrepancies lie and kind of almost start over a little bit, I guess, from a developmental standpoint, which I think is really challenging for people, especially to be told also like, hey, the product you're making doesn't work for, 300 million people that, have this thing that makes them not be able to use what you've put out. So I think as like UI UX designers, it's extremely important to understand what the audience needs, which is why I said earlier when I was introducing myself that I love researching. And I think that there's a major need for designers to understand who they're designing for, but also, we learn a lot about empathetic design and we're taught, to have design thinking and stuff, but empathy can only go so far. We can't, we can try to understand what other people, in affected communities with different disabilities have, but we can't fully know. Like, empathy doesn't fill the place of having that experience. So I think it's going to be really important for developers and UI UX design teams to get people from the affected communities in the actual like development of it to understand fully like what all of these different groups need, if that makes sense. It's been very interesting. There's been some really cool studies done. Let's see, Alice Wang, who is a disability, she's an activist who does a bunch of different stuff, but she did a really in-depth study of virtual and augmented reality and had a large sample of people test basically a bunch of like different virtual and augmented reality headsets and figure out, what's not working. And the list was like,
right. Yep.
Long. But it also kind of raises Joe, were you going to say something?
No, go for it.
Okay, I was just going to say, it also raises the question, is it possible to meet every single person's needs all the time? Is it possible? But I think that as long as that's being considered and it's, people are, developers are trying, or at least being like, hey, we're aware that this is not accessible. We're trying to figure out how to make it accessible. And I think that it would go really far to at least maybe start more of a conversation as opposed to just pushing it to the side, even if there's not the solution for every single aspect of it, if that all makes sense.
Right. And one of the things I'd like to, you hit on it perfectly is, when we develop things, and this is everything from new technology innovation to education, everything, we're really good at covering about 75–80% of the population. That's the biggest swath. And it's when we get into that trench that we start realizing that there's, like you mentioned, hundreds of millions of people that we're not covering, whatever that might be. And one example might be just this one. If, with a lot of the technology we're talking about, about the innovation. If somebody is trying to have an experience but cannot use their hands, going to something like voice activated commands is a way and another alternative that somebody could use, a piece of existing technology. Now, Anna, before we move on, I'm going to move on to Carter in just a second. And then before I go to Zach, are you seeing more innovation or more of this happening in the VR side or in the AR side, or is it really about a blend? Where do you see the efforts really?
I think it's kind of somewhere in the middle. I feel like there's a lot of people all over the world. There's like lots of different pockets of people who are trying to come up with solutions, but because there's not a standard as far as development in virtual or augmented reality, lots of people use lots of different tools to create it. It's really hard to create a standard of accessibility. Like in web design, all the same types of coding are used to create web. So it's really easy to like figure out solutions, screen reading technology, all of that. So I think it'll be a matter of really getting the conversations started, and then being able to kind of figure out and work together as like all of the developers kind of need to be on the same page to start to come together with a standard. And then I think that that'll start to infiltrate both into VR and AR, because I've seen a lot of research done for both, and there's just not really a standard happening for either of them right now.
I think one of the interesting things that I've seen come out of Anna's research is that with the XR industry in such a nascent stage, there's a real opportunity here to not repeat some of the mistakes of more traditional forms of media. For example, she looked back at video and entertainment, as she noted, and then also kind of drawing the line to game development, as that's a good benchmark that we look at when starting to consider spatial and 3D computing and how to navigate through it. And in both cases, the good thing is accessibility seems to be becoming a more predominant focus during the development stage. But in those situations, it was more of an afterthought, right? How do we catch up? How do we accommodate this community, which is numerous, right? So I think really right now, we have an opportunity as developers to consider it first. And there's a couple neat studies that are cited in her research and her articles, where Google tried a few different approaches to integrating it into the development process, and a few other companies that we could learn from. And then, the last point, as Anna mentioned, is that the development efforts are pretty isolated, siloed right now. As those come together, and that's really one of the things we're trying to do with the lab is provide a centralized hub for that conversation to start to happen, right? Pull all these different pockets together and really create a sustaining community to share best practices, especially in development. And again, I think we have a real opportunity to consider this up front and integrate it into the standard development process.
If I can just add,
yeah. Oh, I was just going to say, Anna, we have some questions coming in from people who are watching live.
Okay.
They would love the same question keeps coming up. They'd love a link to your research. If you could share that.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know if you can say it or a good place to find it, but we'll also put that out in the notes and afterwards. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the article that I wrote was earlier this year, which is published on the Third Eye XR. I think it's called I don't remember something. I don't remember what the title is. I can find a link for it here in just a second. And then all the research that I have done this semester, which I have found a lot of stuff. I'm currently writing the final paper right now because it's due at the end of the semester. So I'm not quite done with it yet. But I've just spent a lot of time reading articles from scholars and psychologists. There's a lot of really interesting stuff from psychologists relating to our cognitive, what we take in as people and people with and without disabilities. But Joe, I don't know how to, is there a way to, do you know what the link?
Well, anybody watching right now, we're going to get get the link to the article that Anna wrote. And we're also, Anna, while you're digging, if you can, during this, if you can find the link to the person who was doing the research for the headsets.
Yes, absolutely.
That would be great. I can also share, if we have time, remind me to share. I worked with the company beginning of this year about accessibility, and it was really about self-care through VR. But that could be another topic for another day. Anna, thank you for all of that. I want to transition now. I'm going to jump to Carter real quick. Now, Carter, there's two areas I really kind of want to explore with you. The first one is about the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then after we address that, I really want to just peek into the experimental side of it all. So why don't we start with the first part, talking about the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion in this space and industry. So why don't you share your thoughts on that? Because, again, just like Anna said, this is all important stuff that we're doing and things that need to be addressed and thought about as we're building and designing in this industry.
Yeah, I think a lot of the things that I want to talk about are really similar to what Anna's bringing up, and also Joe, with how the kind of the new nature of XR and the kind of the budding kind of industry that we're in right now. There's a lot of opportunity to look at what past industries have done, especially in big tech, and figure out what they've done wrong and try and counteract that, or divert those issues. I think something that we're seeing right now is with these Silicon Valley companies, these big tech companies. They're kind of doing a mad dash to fix or kind of address their diversity and inclusion issues, especially being really male and white dominant industries. So with XR, I think it's just something really important to consider. Building the industry off of diversity instead of having to go back and kind of rework these really ingrained problems.
Yeah, absolutely. You bring up a good point. Accessibility, equity, inclusion, all of that. That became a very profound problem and issue that came up as soon as about 10 years ago when technology started infiltrating education, and all of a sudden just the need was there. Then it started finding out that if you lived in an affluent area, you had accessibility. If you didn't, you just didn't have it. And so there are plenty of areas in the United States and all over the world, where accessibility is a problem. So we've got accessibility problems. We've got a ceiling for gender equality in the industry and stuff like that. The nice thing is we have people like Kathy Hackle, who is in the industry. She's a great leader, working in the industry, shining the light on, all of the innovation and the spotlight on, women in the industry and different things like that. So it's a very, very important issue. And then, we'll wrap that up and keep talking about that. I'm going to check in with Zach in a second. Carter, when we move on, for the sake of time, this is where I want to talk about, and we're going to jump into the future of it with Zach here in a second. But why don't you talk a little bit about the experimental side or the creative side? I know you kind of like art and design specifically, but then why don't you talk about a little bit your thoughts on it, and then where you can see us going, or the exciting area that's out there.
Yeah. Well, I think XR is definitely starting to be used in a whole lot of different fields than when it was, maybe first thought it would be used in. So I think Anna brought this up. What's really big is like the entertainment industry. But as more XR technologies are being used and developed, I think it's starting to infiltrate into a whole lot of different parts of our lives. And I think what's interesting is how we can explore our more like emotional reactions to these experiences, or what kind of more subtle or intricate feelings that we can convey, or messages that we can convey, or abstract concepts like empathy. How can we convey these things, or at least share these things through XR? Hopefully, create more meaningful experiences with these technologies.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point, and what you guys already talked about, location-based entertainment, basically LBE, is one thing, and that's for people sitting out there wondering exactly what we're talking about, think about, you've probably all seen the VR game where, people are, using the lightsabers and are, slicing Fruit Ninja basically, but in a VR version. Well, that has really propelled an industry now to where there's all kinds of workouts that you can do based on VR. And we even have the Mirror, which is an augmented mirror workout system now. So because of this success, and the nice thing is also now we've got physical body movement. We're able to get engaged using the XR technology, whether we're using, something like a HoloLens or an Oculus or something like that. That has really shown that the marketplace is ready for it. Well, the thing about that is one of the nice things is now people like you guys are starting to look at, like, how do we get that to more people? How do we now take it from game-based enrichment, content enrichment, to meaningful experiences, even more so, almost like whether it's health-oriented, whether it's disability-oriented, so and let's transition now. This might be a perfect segue to you, Zach. Two things. One, I want to just kind of have you share about where you are in your work. And then I really want you to talk about kind of about like the future of UX, UI design and the whole AR, VR future, if you would. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're working on, the area that you focus on, and then if you can kind of parlay that right into like the future of UX, UI and AR, VR, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. So kind of like I said before, I'm normally the detail guy, or like the really like craft guy when it comes down to like getting assets ready and making sure like every little, like all the typography looks good and all the like menus and buttons and stuff like that. I get into all that consistency stuff. So kind of what I'm like most excited about with the future of VR is, and I think Joe and Anna kind of touched on this, how we're getting in early and like an infancy stage of like all this XR technology, so we can kind of learn from what happened through like web design and stuff like that, and those trends, and kind of we can approach things like UI accessibility early, or we can approach things like with more thought and more forward thinking based on like our history, because just like 2D design and web design was based off like wayfinding before, like signage and stuff like that. We can now look at what didn't work with web design and what did work, and then just take the pros, the strengths, and apply that. And then we can kind of ditch any of the weaknesses and kind of come up with new things and see if those work, and start throwing we can start throwing stuff at the wall and just see what sticks. I think that's what's really exciting, is we can just start playing a little bit, but still keep in mind like our ultimate goal is to to help people and make good systems that work.
Absolutely. And for those of you who are just joining us, this is our panel on UX, UI in augmented and virtual reality. We're really using the term XR to incorporate it all. And so for those of you who are watching, what Zach is talking about and referencing is assets. So think about that's one of the things he's talking about. So think about when you are working with your mobile device or a tablet or something, or even a computer software program, and maybe you have to get assets out of a library. How you go get those assets out of a library, if you're using a HoloLens and you're pinching and bringing them, and the options coming up here, your option is top left. Well, what we're talking about is how you access the library and assets. Does top left work best, or is it top right, or is it something that comes up? Think about it like this. For anybody who's built a PowerPoint or a slide deck, anything like that, think about the transition, or how things come in, or how you access information. That's all what we're talking about. So we're talking about how you access assets or digital assets in a library. That's kind of what we're talking about, UX, UI. Now, Zach, before we tap Joe real quick again here in a moment, what excites you most about working in this industry, and what's just around the future for you?
I think what really excites me is just the ability to try new, like, because we really can just we can try things that haven't been done before, like different user experience systems and UI systems, kind of different ways to like have a menu stay with you or appear, yes. and do things that we didn't expect, but it mirrors things that we're comfortable with, and like it feels natural, it feels intuitive, and that's what really excites me, is just seeing how some of these natural progression of menus will happen, and just normal UI will change.
That's awesome. So thank you for that, Zach. And I'm going to come back to you three in just a moment. But Joe, I really want to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit. I'm not going to let the cat out of the bag, but I have tested something that you have demo wise. Okay. And you know what I'm talking about. I'm not even going to make you share that, but I want you to think about like your own product development and innovation, because that what we're talking about happens to be for a HoloLens 2. I'd like you to just take a moment, talk a little bit more about, Third Coast, your company and your work, kind of like what your bread and butter is, but also where you are really going. Like, where are you pushing the envelope in innovation where you're at?
No, absolutely. One of the things that's a driving mantra for us is to create experiences, no matter what we're doing, that are delightful and easy to consume, and quickly get the user to the objective, right? So I think that really plays into user experience. And I just want to backtrack for a second. One of the things you noted earlier when kind of bringing up the entertainment aspect of things. So some of those examples that you noted, if you really look at them, for a long time, entertainment, as we've known it, has been very much a passive experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
Good point.
as we see entertainment start to embrace XR technology, it's really requiring the user to lean in and take a more active approach. And then, so when we were looking at that, because at our company, we're in the fortunate position to span both industries, the entertainment, but then also the enterprise side, right? And at first, 5 years ago, we thought, oh, this is hot tech. It's going to catch on for the entertainment side. What can we be doing for our reality TV shows or other commercial projects? And we had a couple bites on that, but what really started to emerge was the demand uptick for the practical and tactical solutions that come along with XR when applied specifically to business processes, workflows. A quick example, how to bring work instructions to how to operate a machine right to the machine versus having it a separate user manual that you kind of read, or a training you go through a few days before in a separate classroom or something. Now we can really converge everything into the point of operation and have those instructions delivered when they need to be delivered, right? So when we first started looking at that, okay, that really increased the need for a really refined UX UI experience. Especially now that the tech is, like I said earlier, the tech is out there, it's stable, it's scalable. But what we didn't think had been solved yet is the ease, that delightful experience that a user can get from going through that XR experience. Give a shout out to someone you mentioned earlier, Kathy Hackle, because I think she had a great article about a year ago that really started covering this topic, and a quote that she included that has become our mantra at the lab is start with the art. And really kind of, when you bring somebody into the experience, first present it in a way that is easy, is intuitive, right? And that sounds simple, but that's really the challenge. Because when you start looking at it, one of the things we say is from the time of Gutenberg, when we first started getting the print press going, all of the information that we as humans have been exchanging has been through 2D interfaces, right? So what happens when you start poking through and including that Z-axis, coming from the video industry, one of the things we noticed early on was when we're making a video, we have complete control and complete power, right? We have a frame, and we decide as the directors what goes inside that frame, and then that determines what the user's paying attention to. As soon as you try that with a 360 experience, you realize very quickly you have no control anymore over what the user is doing. They can drop in there and they can be looking around and everything. So really, that was like, holy cow, that was a big epiphany for us, because it really challenged us to start to look at other conventions, other ways of training that attention, using sound, for example, in a spatial setting. That's something usually that's thought of later down the road. But these are some of the things you can think of up front. For example, if I'm in a 360 experience right now, or a VR experience right now, and I want the user to look behind them, I can trigger a sound behind it, and you're naturally going to react, right? Or borrowing from some of the gaming industry, like I said before, where you can play with color and have like a red flash over here, that's going to pull someone's attention, right? So these are just little small examples. I think when applying to the actual enterprise, practical, tactical realm, a corporate project that came through the lab this summer that was a very interesting experiment, but really led to a breakthrough, was an onboarding application, HoloLens 2 onboarding application for machine manufacturer. And one of the things we noticed was, hey, we need this menu system to be out of the way, but always accessible. And the students really came up with a neat solution to this that we call the AR tool belt, which is kind of like a control panel thing that's a little bit above your waist and always follows you around, so you can always have it accessible, but it's not in your view, right? Right there, I think is a huge breakthrough. And then so a lot of the process is really about understanding and really going through the principles that define the 2D world. And that's our final project that we're working on right now, which is really amazing. Is a designer, lead designer from GM named John Yablonsky came out with a series of posters.
They're great.
Yeah, it's very simple. Capture 20 design principles for UX, called thelawsofux.com. And we're taking those principles and really digging into each one of them to see, hey, does the principle apply to 3D spatial computing? If so, how? And what are the things we need to consider? And then showing an example as well. So the final product will be, you'll be able to scan the poster, and then an AR experience will emerge that interprets how that law can be applied, and how it might be tweaked when considering developing an AR or VR project. And then specifically to answer your question regarding our product, we're always looking to push the envelope, and we like XR because it's cool, but that's not why we're doing it, right? It's a tool in our tool belt, and we want to use it to create more efficiencies and create experiences that increase efficacy for business in general, right? So one of the things we noticed, and it's a HoloLens experience, is another gap where the development cycle to create an AR experience can pretty much be long, extensive, requires remote development from a desktop computer, and can take 6 to 12 weeks to really flesh out, right?
Yep.
So to solve that issue, we've developed a system where you, as the user, can now create on the fly AR experiences in the moment with the HoloLens, save it, take it off, give it to somebody else, and then that experience shows up. And it really increases that, both rapid prototyping, but really creating new set of work instructions or whatever it might be. It's now becoming a tool that we can use like we do a pen, right?
And Joe, and I've said this privately, I'm gonna say it publicly, and when that is ready, I'm the first person outside the company that gets a chance to play with it, because I've seen it, I've played with it, I've built with it. It's incredible. For those of you who are just joining us, I'm your host, Brad Waid, with the VRARA Detroit. I am the co-chapter president. We're doing a discussion with the panel of a lot of great folks on UX, UI in design. It is great to have all of you here. Now, we're getting a lot of great questions from people who are joining us all over the world. We've got questions from France, people all over the world asking questions. We're going to dive a little bit into hardware and software, and I'm going to keep this pretty light. what I want to ask the students, all three of you, is two questions, and one of them might be the same, I don't know, but the two questions I want to ask basically is, what is your preference for hardware? Which one do you like to work with? And then what software, and that may not be all of you, for those of you who are working with the software, what software are you using to build? So Zach, why don't we start with you? Preference for hardware, like which do you like to use the most? And then what software programs are you using or you'd like to use to build?
I don't know. I don't know if I have a VR AR like preference for hardware. I've come to really like the HoloLens. It's a lot of fun. It's really unique compared to like all the VR headsets out there.
Yeah, for sure. It's a very unique aspect. It's got a different set of functionality to it and stuff. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But for like software, I think it's really just defining what the solution is and what your best end goal is, and then letting the software like kind of just be a tool, like a ruler. So like if I need to do menus, I'll do them in Illustrator, and then I will import them into like Vuforia or Unity or something like that for the actual experience. It really depends on what the end goal is. I don't think there's a correct answer for best.
Yeah, there's a lot of different options. Joe, I see you getting excited there. Why don't you just run through some of them, Vuforia, Unreal, all that. Why don't you just run through some of the software options that you guys use?
Sure, absolutely. And just one note I want to make. Zach earlier commented about how much fun it is just to be able to go and explore and try different things and everything, and that's definitely part of it. But one of the key aspects of the that we follow is that we lead with a design thinking approach to what we're doing. So he alluded to it in his statement where, first we want to understand exactly what the purpose is, right? And who the audience is, right? Then based on that really defines what tools we should be using, right? So for example, if we're talking to somebody that's looking for an experience that will be a public experience used commercially, then we'll want to lean more into a tool that services WebXR, right? And no need to download an app because that's been proven to be a barrier and things like that, right? And there's what I'm excited about is the momentum in this area has been increasing. So there's, for example, awe.com, I think it is a great. What's that?
It's at AWE.
AWE, yep. XR.plus is another great tool. Let's see, theroar.io is another great tool. A lot of companies that first came out with web-based authoring tools for AR experiences are now starting to integrate the WebXR capability, as well as Unity, some of the traditional. So the two main tools that you'll see most predominantly are Unreal Engine and Unity, which are gaming engines, right? Initially, but you can incorporate different SDKs. So for augmented reality, Vuforia SDK is a big one. And then, for scalable industrial solutions, PTC.
Yep.
Full disclaimer, we are a partner and reseller of PTC. That said, we are agnostic, so we like their technology and the direction they're going. But we'll use Microsoft Mixed Reality SDK 2.0 is another great resource. I'm trying to think. And then for 360, there's Google 360 VR authoring, and you'll come up with a list. Some are better than the other, but again, I would point back to what really informs our decisions when thinking of the tools. Starts with the consideration of the goal of the project and the audience, right? Who are we going to serve, and how can we best serve them?
Yes, you're really looking at it from a solutions, like what is your need? Because like there's a lot of different tools, and Zach referenced that as well, based on what is the need, what's the functionality and stuff like that. So we have about 15 minutes left. I want to make sure we get into some more different areas that we're going to talk about. So, but Anna and Carter, I'd like to just kind of get your feedback as far as like, which one do you prefer? What hardware do you like? And just it's like as far as exploring or building. Anna, we'll start with you. Just like which one do you like to put on and wear or use? Oh, can't hear you. It might be me, but there we go.
Sorry, there we go. So I like no cords. I've had a lot of fun with the Oculus Quest this summer. It's very easy to just throw on and you can get into VR. There's a lot of fun WebXR experiences that you can get from like the Oculus browser. Lots of fun. Not anything that's mostly just like whimsical, like, oh wow, it does that. You can click on it, you can go in here. Like it's just a lot of fun to explore. And if I'm being honest, I haven't really done a ton of actual like VR and AR development. That's not really where my expertise is. I have spent a little bit of time in Facebook's Spark AR, where you can make like face filters, which has been fun. That was a good starting point for me to really understand like the three-dimensional world from a development point in very like layman's terms. You have to understand a little bit of 3D modeling and how there's no code or anything though.
Right.
But yeah, so that was kind of fun. More surface level. I definitely enjoy the more of like the designing the interface, what it's going to look like, and then working with the like actual developers to come up with the solution that works. That makes sense?
Yeah, it does. Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you. And Carter, I know being in graphics and art, maybe the way you consume or interact with content, there's there's 3D paint, there's paintbrush, there's all kinds of stuff. There's artists out there that are creating things in 3 dimensions and incredible work. Where do you like to live? Like, what do you use? What do you like to experience with or even build with?
I'd have to say I'm kind of in a similar boat with Anna, where a lot of my experience and expertise is more like kind of in the more traditional like Adobe Creative Suite software. But in terms of hardware, I'll start there. Is that I think like we shouldn't like kind of dismiss like the possibilities of just like a cell phone and like kind of AR capabilities that everyone can have like at their fingertips. And for me, that's been the place like that I've explored XR the most is with like AR and over social media and stuff like that. So I think that is a really great, not only starting point, but place to really develop further, especially again with what Anna brought up with Spark AR. It's been a really cool tool to explore.
Carter, you bring up a great point, and anybody that's heard me speak has heard this spiel already. We all, since I'm pretty sure our audience is very educated in AR and VR. One of the things to always consider is the entry point for AR is the masses. You can get to the masses like in an instant. There are just so many devices. Most people have at least one, but usually, in the industrialized world, all of us have multiple devices, phones and tablets. So already right there, we have access to it. If that accessibility is not an issue, it's an easy entry point. Because the way I talk about it is if you want to get to the masses quickly, AR for a phone, a tablet, you can get everybody, and that's a great thing to think about. If you're talking about more deeper, more rich user experience, then maybe the VR is the way to go. And one of the things I talk about too is, if you're talking about consumption or interaction, AR on a phone or tablet is great because you can get to the masses, you can build experiences in an instant. If you're talking about, things like training or onboarding, anytime something is dangerous or expensive, VR is a much better option to go. Because if you're putting somebody in a $5 million piece of equipment, you really don't want them to make a mistake in that real piece of equipment. You want to get their muscle memory, want to get their times and their hours logged in. Also, the exact same thing if something is dangerous. If we're talking about construction work and we have people at very high, elevations and that are very dangerous, we'd rather train them in a VR environment and have them fall off a 1-inch or a 2-inch 2x4. And if you haven't done the research or seen it, check out videos on people learning or scaling up at heights, and they're wearing a VR headset. Joe's already laughing, he knows. And you'll see in real life, they're on like a 2x4 and they're walking a plane. But in their world, they're 30, 40 stories up and they fall and they freak out. They lose their minds. I've been there. It's not fun. It's very powerful. So if you are watching this today and you're really thinking about what is the best fit for me, AR, VR, in the whole XR area, really anybody like Joe and his team is going to come to you and be like, well, what is your need? Let's understand your need. They use a design thinking approach, what are we trying to solve? What is your pain point? What are we trying to do? And then come up with the best solution. For some people, it might be boom, an app, AR experience on a tablet or a mobile device. For others, it may be using a fully immersive Oculus or something. Some people, now this is where I'm going to go back to the secret project that you are working on, Joe. This happens to be a HoloLens 2 product, and I had somebody ask about this. They'd like some more information. What I'll do is I'll just kind of explain a little more what Joe is saying is, this product is really talking about building in real time with the HoloLens. Think about it. I'm going to make up the scenario. This is not what it is because I don't want to give away any IP or anything. But think about, let's say you're on a construction site and think about building in Minecraft. Okay, just think if you were using your own product. Say you're an industrial producer of a product, some type of widget. Just think if you were able to work out those details in real time, drop those assets in the real space in real time and see if it's going to work. Think about it like this. Think about it if you're ready to build a plant and move a plant, and you're going from legacy machines to smart machines, and now you're doing a whole plant build. This is where like a digital or an IoT architect comes in place, using a VR type experience and a lot of UX UI. This is now where you're able to build and drop assets in places in real space to where you can see how do they interact with each other, how do they work out, what you can get all of the feedback on all the sensors, what is the energy input, what is the energy output, what greenhouses are being emitted, what is the temperature on the machines, all of that. We are now living in a time where we have the ability to do that. We have the ability through AR, VR to see and build things for the future. We can drop assets in real time and see what they're going to look like. Just like now, think about it. Now we have the ability, if you really want, you can jump into VR experience, test drive a new car. I've seen some amazing experiences. We bump that up from the consumer to the industrial level. We're now talking about $2 billion plants. We're talking about rehauling everything, rebuilding everything. It's now cost effective to create experiences like that. And that is where people like Joe and the students on board today are going to be not only helping us now, but those three right on top and many other students like them are the future of this industry. And as we start to wrap up, we only have a couple minutes. I'm going to start with the students, and this will probably be the last thing I get to ask of you. But let's go. This time we're going to go Carter, and then Zach, and then Anna, and then I'm going to come back to Joe and John. But let's start with Carter. It's going to be the same question for all of you. Now, what are you most excited about right now as you start to finish and get out there and really putting your boots to the pavement? What are you most excited about? We'll start with Carter.
Oh man.
Put you on the spot.
Yeah, really. I don't know. I'm excited to kind of go through like personal projects or experiment with these different ways that XR or that UI can work in XR. Zach brought this up earlier, where we're kind of at this point where we're borrowing old UI or UI that's seen on a 2D interface, and we're putting into XR, and we're kind of seeing how it works and getting rid of what doesn't, and then trying new things to see what does stick. And I think that's going to be the most exciting thing, is trying these new things, seeing what sticks, seeing what doesn't, and just kind of using this playful mindset, or this kind of experimental mindset, where we can try weird things, and maybe it doesn't work and maybe it does. And I think that's going to be the most exciting.
Well, that's awesome. So you're like a pioneer wanting to check things out and learn and trial and error and experiment. I love it. Carter, thank you. All right, Zach, let's go with you. What are you most excited about right now going into this industry?
Yeah, I think I'm most excited. It's pretty much the similar things. I'm most excited for the next new project. I always like kind of the beginning stages of a new project, because that's where you really get to like test new ideas. So I'm most excited for starting the next new project more than I am always with my current projects.
So it's really always getting to experience new things and building new projects, solve new problems and different things. I mean, because as we continue with this digital revolution, if you will, and digital transformation, with everything. There's going to be new problems that arise. They're going to need solutions. So, well, that's great. Well, thank you, Zach and Anna. We're gonna end this with you as you sit there thinking about graduating in just a few weeks. What are you most excited about?
I think relating specifically to XR, I don't know exactly, where life is going to take me in the next couple of years, but I'm going to loop back again to the accessibility conversation. I have learned so much this year, and I feel like it would be a waste for me to not at least try to continue that conversation within this industry and try to bring people together to form a standard and try to really make accessibility at the forefront of XR thinking. I'm very passionate about it, and I think that I could potentially have a lot to offer, and I really just want to keep going in that direction and keep learning. And I've got some ideas that I haven't necessarily fully fleshed out yet, but I think that there's going to be an opportunity for me moving forward to continue that research and hopefully someday production of solutions.
Well, that's fantastic, and it's not possibly have something to offer. You already have a lot to offer, as do all of you. We really appreciate your time. And now, John, I know you've been kind of sitting back there. I appreciate you being on today. I just want to give you one. I want to say thank you for having your students on here and being a part of this today. I'd like to give you an opportunity to have some closing thoughts about your work, the students, anything you'd like to share just over the next minute or so.
Sure. Although I'm not directly involved with digital media via coursework at Kendall, other than it being a considered component of an integrated system or an integrated campaign, I love the knowledge and the process that the students have gained throughout their educational career, and how they apply that to anything and everything that they design, from thinking to making. Joel alluded to design thinking processes and how the students integrate that not only in their traditional 2D understanding of graphic design or applications of that, but how that they have evolved that process and that understanding into this new virtual world. I really appreciate that in their exuberance and willingness just to dive in, not knowing if the pool had any water in it or not, and being able to survive, being able to tread it and really immerse themselves into it. And I think the more they get involved with it, the more excited they become, and the more future-oriented they're also becoming too as well. Our future is good. Their future is great.
I agree. Well, thank you, John, for that, and thank you again to the students. Joe, now I'm gonna give you a moment here to have some closing thoughts, because if we had it to our own devices, you and I would jump down the rabbit hole for 2, 3, 4 hours like we did last time we were hanging out. So I'd love to just get your 60 seconds of overview, your thoughts of the future and things moving forward.
Sure. No, just to echo Koz's point, the students really did dive in, had no idea what they were getting into, and have done some great research. But I think one of the great things that has come out of the lab and really speaks to where we are in terms of the development of the industry is the actual real world impact that they've been able to have working in doing the research, but then really having the opportunities to apply them to real world enterprise solutions that are being used in real life now. So the urgency is high to have some of these UX UI breakthroughs, because the XR applications have such a direct impact on value for businesses that we need solid, accessible and navigable experiences to be integrated sooner rather than later, right? And I think that also touches on something that you were noting earlier about the ability to create on the fly, the top secret project we're working on, that sort of thing, right? One of the key aspects of that really lends to the value and impact that XR is starting to have, especially in the enterprise, is when it first started. AR, for example, is great functionality for visualization, right? But where it's starting to, turn the corner here is that it's also now becoming a great tool for data input or information exchange at the point of where things are happening, right? And that's really the crux of what we're talking about, because that exposes the big problem of UX UI. So if we're going to start to interact with computers, but in a very contextual way, how do we do that? What are the menus? How do they not get in our way? Is a flat menu the way to do it, or is it more contextual? Do we look at the real world for inspiration for this, or do we look at other 2D experiences? Those are some of the things that we're exploring and we'll continue to try, and play with, have fun with. But at the end of the day, we have our sights set on really creating some strong standards that we can make available to the rest of the community, and hopefully these new principles will start to integrate into all development efforts, and we'll all have better XR experiences.
Well, that's awesome. Well, everybody here today, thank you. Anna, Zach, Carter, thank you for joining us today. You guys are getting all kinds of great comments from people who are watching and excited about your future and thankful for what you guys are doing. John and Joe, thank you for joining today. Yeah, John?
Yeah, if I might, I'd be really remorse, I'm sure we all would, if we didn't acknowledge our co-principal, investigator, and professor of graphic design at Kendall. Her name is Joan Seacrest. Without her involvement, we might not be here today. And we also appreciate her holding us accountable.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you. We appreciate that shout out. For everyone watching today, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate you being part of our event, coming to you live from Michigan through the Detroit chapter. Wherever you are all over the world, we're glad that you joined us today. Please feel free to reach out to anybody on the panel. And if you have any questions about AR/VR or the VRAA Society, please connect with me on social media. And if you have any questions for anybody in the panel, let's continue this conversation and keep it going, because it's through all of us that we move this industry forward. It's everybody out there and it's everybody here. So again, Anna, Zach, Carter, thank you for joining us. John and Joe, thank you. And everyone, I am your host, Brad Waid. It is so great to be with you today. It is my honor. Thank you for being here. We will see you next time on our next Detroit event for the VRARA, and we'll see you later. Thanks for joining us, everybody.